how you doing? Clay Blair with Boulevard Recording here. I have a very special video for you today. If you haven't read yet, Waves just released a new plugin. It is the very famous Abbey Road RS124. Now, some of you might remember the plugin probably, I don't know, about a decade ago that existed for a while that did the RS124. And I personally actually thought that was a pretty good plugin. But we've had nothing since then. I actually own a real unit made by Chandler Limited that I use on almost every single tracking session I do. So I have a lot of experience with the RS124 compressor. And before that, I owned Altec 436Bs and Cs, so I'm very familiar with the sound of these. Okay, so I have up a song I produced by a band. Actually, I'm playing drums on this, called The Morning Yells. And let's start with something fun. Let's start with the drum bus. Here we go. This is the fastest recovery speed. Recovery means release time. The input's all the way up. We've got the attenuator at 0. We have two types here, which I'll get into. But first, listen. So it's pretty gushy, right? I really like it. Recovery. So, fast, you got 6 speeds. This is the slowest. So you can see how slow the VU meter comes back. God, it's like a couple seconds. And this is so on the real units as well. I usually find myself hanging around 1, 2, and 3. This is my go-to bass compressor, the hardware version, and I certainly am going to use this plug-in on bass as well. Let's pull the input back a little bit and listen to it again, and I'm going to go between speeds 1 and 2. Superfuse. So I actually have this on my unit, on my hardware unit made by Chandler, and the explanation I got, and it seems to be similar here, is that everything gets faster and more extreme. The attack gets faster, the release gets faster. So I'm gonna do the superfuse mode here back and forth and let you guys hear it. Quite a difference, right? So you have unit type, studio, cutter. What's the difference? Okay, so this is basically a difference of attack time. They had different units that had different attack times at Abbey Road, and these never had attack controls on them. So if you're confused by this, don't be. It does change colors because they're modeling different units. That's how it worked at Abbey Road. They had different units for different tasks. The cutter refers to the cutting lathe. So this has a slower attack. So I'm going to do superfuse and let you hear the difference between the studio and the cutter. So basically all this is really doing is changing the attack time. So let's start with studio and then we'll go to cutter. So as you can hear, the studio option is a bit more squashed, and the cutter option, you have a bit more attack on the kick and snare, and that's basically all it is an attack control. Getting to the other controls on this guy, a lot of people, I'm going to get into the auto hold, but this is pretty cool. So I actually dialed in a sound. Let me see if I can remember what I did earlier. Down here we have, this is great, and actually the fact that you can do this in MS is incredible. I will definitely use that a lot on mixes. So we got a high pass, that does either side, both sides. You can tie them together, separate them. Let's say you're doing MS and your mid, you know, you got a lot of bass going on in there, so you don't want to kill it too much. So you might back this up there, and on your sides, you might want to keep your bass completely out of the compression realm. So maybe you'll run that all the way up to 200. We'll just listen to this in the mix a little bit, and then I'm going to bypass it. So very different, right? That's super fuse mode. It really compresses that drum bus. It brings out the high end. It really brings out the cymbals and the hi-hats. So let's go to something a little different. Let's check a vocal out.
I was in Century City walking through the dark, kicking the time, you know.
Okay, so do you hear that? He says kick. Listen to how loud it gets.
Kicking the time.
Okay, so what's happening there? So on the original units on the recovery, there were little dots in between each one of these slow and fast options, and there would be a hold option. And what you could do, this would be a this little button here would be something that you could actually prime your hold with. So you could change this to the hold option and then prime it to move this meter over to about, you know, wherever you're compressing. So one thing that's really cool that Waves did is they put the auto hold on here so that you don't have to switch back and forth every time. So how do you use it? So if you're compressing that much and every time you hear a new line, you're starting to hear that really big rush of noise in the beginning. This is what you can do. So one more time.
I was in Century City.
So you can put on auto hold, and what it's going to do is it's going to prime it back to around where you're compressing. And right before the vocal comes in, we'll release it.
I was in Century City walking through the dark.
And again.
Kicking the time, you know, I had nowhere to be.
So that's a pretty cool effect. You might use that. It's pretty easy to automate it. That's handy. That's when you're really compressing hard. If you don't want those super harsh first lines, the hold option is really good for that. It's also really good for quiet parts in a mix. So this would be where I would go for a mix. I'd start over at Cutter and see what we're dealing with here. Here's a little washy. I also have it on the drums, so. Now, Super Fuse on a mix is pretty cool. Let's check that out. Let's see what happens with Super Fuse on a mix. I love the way that sounds. That's really cool. So this mix knob is super useful, and so is the high pass. So I'm going to show you guys something a little more unconventional. As you guys know, I do Beatles kind recordings and that kind of thing. And I teach how to re-record stuff like the Beatles did. And I usually use my RS when I do those videos for bass, for guitar, for piano, anything they would have used it for. But I'm going to let you guys hear a bit of bass. and you'll probably know the song, and let you hear it with the RS. So all I got on here is the TG12345. There's no compression going on, and the RS going on as well. Let's solo this. All right, bypassed. It's a Rick bass going into a Fender Bassman with a C12. Sounds pretty awesome. It really sounds good on that. It does what I would expect mine to do, which is it really makes the bass sound, it grabs it and it makes it sound like it's fuller, and it makes it sound like it's really in the mix and really in your face in a cool way that really no other compressor does. Let's see what we got. I think we got, yeah. Really slamming it. So it's engaged. We'll do it without. Engaged. You can definitely hear that it affects the high end. It definitely gets a bit, you know, crunchier on the highs, which is pretty cool. I'm going to play it back and engage it in the mix. See, it really just kind of ties it together a little better. Let's see what Superfuse sounds like with this type of drum bus. Why don't we quickly compare my RS to the one that we have in Pro Tools made by Waves. And these are both in Superfuse mode. I noticed that the high end on mine seems to stay a little truer, whereas this high end gets a little crunchier. Mine seems to be just different, you know. The high end on mine is definitely, it acts differently than it does on the plug-in. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you enjoy the RS124. It's one of the most classic compressors ever made, and they're very rare and hard to get, and now you can have one in your own studio.